Okay, welcome to Cinelit. Today we are looking at the career of Kathleen Turner, one of the perennial headliners of 1980s and early 90s cinema, and the star of one of my personal favourite films. My name is Adam Marsh, I'm your host today, and I'm joined as ever by Cinelit's resident expert, Daryl Buxton. How are you, Daryl?
I'm fine, Adam. Kathleen Turner has been one of the great American stars of the past 40 years, so really looking forward to talking about her and her films.
Yeah, it kind of feels like she'd been forgotten a little bit, and in the sort of like usually these actors and actresses get brought back for doing stuff, you know, later on in their career and start filling out roles in Marvel movies and DC. And Kathleen Turner's not really done that. She's stoutly refused to do that kind of thing and gone straight to the stage and has been on the stage pretty much for the last 20 years.
Yeah, I think right from the start of her career, you could always tell, you know, when you saw her in those early films, you could tell that she was someone who had her own mind and was going to follow her career the way she wanted to. And I think she largely has done. And she's done the stuff she wanted to do. And whether it was a hit or not, you know, and she's had some things that haven't worked and haven't been successes, I think they've always been things that she's wanted to do. So she's very, very much of her own mind and not taking orders from Hollywood. So which is great, you know.
I think when we first started talking about doing an episode about Kathleen Turner, usually we look at these, when we look at actors, we look at like 5 films of their career and try and bring other films into it as we discuss it, or we go through like a chronological idea of how we look at these actors. With Kathleen Turner, it's kind of a different thing. She tends to do 3 types of movies as we were looking, particularly during that sort of like 13-year period where she was like, you know, A-listing, headlining Hollywood movies. She tends to do sort of like adventure movies, you know, of your Romancing the Stone types. She does thrillers like Body Heat, V.R. Wachowski, you know, those kind of things, Prizzi's Honor. Or she does like comedies, straight out comedies, you know, like Who Framed Roger Rabbit, Undercover Blues, Serial Mom, you know. So she tends to fit into these 3 categories. So I think we're going to look at her career through genre rather than anything else this today. So first of all, I guess we'll start with outside of Who Framed Roger Rabbit, probably her biggest hit, which was Romancing the Stone, just her 3rd big screen movie. She was a hit straight away in cinema.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is unusual, I think, even back then, you know.
Oh yeah, I mean, we'll talk about Body Heat in detail later on, but that launched her as an instant star.
Yeah,
and within a couple of years, she was doing Romancing the Stone, which was one of the big movies of a very big year. 1984, which brought loads and loads of, you know, it was a big sort of blockbuster year in the early days of the blockbuster still as well. You know, it wasn't, it was just starting to sort of emerge as a thing in Hollywood at that time, post Jaws and post The Exorcist and so on in the 70s. Yeah, Romancing the Stone was a smash. And she looked in it as though she'd been around for years and years and years. She looked like she'd got the Hollywood experience and had lived the Hollywood life. And she's up there on screen with Michael Douglas, and she's his equal.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, this movie, I mean, one of my all-time favourites, I think, Romancing the Stone. You know, it borrows a lot from 1930s and 40s serials and adventure films of that ilk, but distinctly makes it a very 80s film as well. You know, it's very much rooted in the 80s. It's not like in Indiana Jones where it's 1940s, you know, 1950s. You know, that's the setting. They've set it in the modern era and recreated that adventure film feeling.
Exactly. You know, what we've got here, it's basically pitched somewhere in between the African Queen and the Bob Hope, Bing Crosby, Dorothy Lamour Road series. It's sort of a cousin of those, and it sits nicely in between those. So it harks back to old Hollywood. And this is one thing that I think we're going to say about Kathleen in the podcast today, is that a lot of her major roles and a lot of the films that she's best known for are very retro without being consciously retro, I think. You know, it just seems to be a sort of accident of her career that almost everything she's done has been something that could have been made 40 years earlier. But as you say, Adam, is often set in the modern day, but it's still taking that sort of old school style and bringing it into the 80s or early 90s. Romancing the Stone's absolutely perfect in that respect. And as you say, you've got a direct comparison with the Indiana Jones series that was contemporary.
Yeah, I mean, I can't tell you how much I love Romancing the Stone. I mean, it's this. I watched it repeatedly as a kid and as a teenager, and just the script for that has been worked to within an inch of its life. The casting is absolutely impeccable, and I can't think of a film that's better cast than Romancing the Stone, because every character, it's not just the two leads in this that are brilliantly cast, because they are brilliantly cast. Michael Douglas playing a sort of like roguish adventurer type character, and you've got Kathleen Turner playing the mousy Hollywood stunner playing the mousy romance novelist, but pulling it off brilliantly. And then but beyond that, you got Danny DeVito in arguably a star-making role for him on the big screen. Obviously he'd done Taxi on the TV and things like that, but it's probably the one that helped him become a movie star.
Yeah. That's back to what we were talking about in the 80s comedy podcast a few months ago, where this was the era in which the bridge between TV and movies became a little bit blurred, and it had always been sort of entirely separate. You either appeared on television or you appeared in film, and suddenly actors like DeVito were coming through and stepping from one to the other and back again, and in his case, even eventually directing films and directing Douglas and Turner eventually.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, what a cast it is, as you say. Every part, I think, is played by someone who's absolutely right for the role. And they've obviously put a lot of thought into that and put a lot into the casting process.
I guess the nature of the story, with it being a road movie, with it being an adventure story where they are bumping into different characters as they go along in their little quest to find the MacGuffin of the emerald, of the stone. You naturally are going to create these little funny supporting characters.
Yeah, you can't get away with just having extras doing that stuff, can you? So yeah.
No, I mean, the guy that stands out for me, obviously, I think it's for everyone, is the drug lord, criminal boss, Alfonso Arau, playing Juan, the guy who loves Joan Wilder novels. Every time I see him on screen, he just elevates the movie with a role that could have easily been just a small little like incidental moment where it gets the characters from A to B. And then, we move on with the plot. But he just like, oh, wow, what a creation.
Yeah. Now, you talked about Kathleen playing the sort of mousy novelist, which she does, who sort of comes into her own as the story goes on and shows her true colours, So it is the sort of Katharine Hepburn, African Queen sort of role, really, But what range that shows so early in her career, because she's done Body Heat already, where she's played a completely different type of character, your sort of 1940s classic femme fatale in a film noir, or in this case in a sort of neo-noir. And suddenly within a couple of years and within a couple of films, she's doing something completely different. So that's already showing just how talented she was, and proving to audiences that you never knew quite what you were going to get from Kathleen Turner. And I think she maintained that through her career.
Absolutely. She's great in this movie. And it was a mini franchise, I guess. And then obviously went on and did a sequel. Should we talk about the sequel now?
I think so. I think we can lump the two films together, really, because the sequel came out the following year. Yeah. So it wasn't, you're going to wait 4 years and get this team again. It was straight away. I mean, Jewel of the Nile is not. It looks like a quickie sequel to me, and it doesn't hold. It didn't hold up as well even at the time, and it certainly doesn't now. And I think there's a lot of slightly dodgy, maybe slightly racist sort of caricatures in among the background characters, which I think it seemed to be a bit of a feature of mid-80s cinema, and it's something that was sort of the last gasp of that sort of thing, I think, fortunately, and it sort of died out ever since. It's not often that you get anyone doing a sort of cliched character like that. But the leads, I think, are fine in it. Douglas and Turner make a great team. The slight problem, again, with the script of Jewel of the Nile is it does that thing that people always say about Sherlock Holmes' Hound of the Baskervilles. It separates the two lead characters for early on and for a lot of the film, and you sort of want them to be together. You want them going on adventures together. And there are periods in Jewel of the Nile where they're sort of separated, and we see sort of solo scenes. But it looks like what it is, a sort of quickie sequel to a hit. And it's nice to watch the two films together. But I think if you were watching Jewel of the Nile in isolation, you'd feel a bit cheated and maybe a little bit offended by it, in parts.
Yeah, I think the thing that really stood out to me was just a difference in the writers, basically. Yeah. Because the original's written by Diane Thomas, who I think she sadly died that year. Yeah,
because she gets a sort of acknowledgement at the end of Jewel of the Nile. The film's sort of dedicated to her.
Yeah, I mean, so this film's based on her character, but she had no writing input into the script, and I think it shows. I mean. It's written by two men for a start, and that kind of shows as well. And I mean, particularly shows in the very opening scene, because it does in the original Romance in the Stone. They have the fictionalized scene that she's writing in her novel. Mm. And you have that scene in Romance in the Stone, and they repeat it in the second one, but instead of the shadowed hero Jesse in the first film, you've got Jack. You've got Michael Douglas's character playing the role in this.
Yeah, almost like it's a film version of the novel that the character's written, and that Michael Douglas is in the film. So,
but I think the thing it completely misses is it's mocking, and it's not. It's properly mocking romance novels.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think the first one doesn't do that. I think
it celebrates them.
It celebrates them. It has a bit of fun with some of the conventions and some of the tropes, but its heart's in the right place with it. And I don't know whether that's because it's written by a woman, and these sequels they were written by men, and they were like, oh, it's the romance bit, it's silly, and they've just gone off on that route. I don't know, but it definitely comes across like that, and it makes you feel like if you're not taking it seriously, why should I like this character who writes these stupid stories? And I think the first one nails that balance really well, but the second one really doesn't. I think it misunderstands what the first one's about.
Yeah. It's interesting that we didn't get a part 3, that these characters didn't continue, but that we did get another Turner Douglas movie. So Hollywood liked the pairing, it liked the team of Turner Douglas and Danny DeVito, but Jewel of the Nile, this particular bunch of characters ran out of steam.
Yeah, to be honest with you, it's whether they had any life beyond the first one, because the first one's literally the story arc is her coming out of her shell, becoming more of a rounded person, and not living her life through fantasy.
And you can only do that once. Yeah,
you can only do that story once, and you can't keep repeating it. So yes, it doesn't really work that well. And I think we talked about Indiana Jones as being a big influence on these movies, and I think the first one, it definitely has that feel of an Indiana Jones, a 1930s, 40s serial. And this second one does as well, but for me, misses out. It takes the wrong lessons from Indiana Jones. I don't think this film can handle it. Ideally, the magic elements of it, the ridiculous magic stuff at the end of the movie.
Yeah.
Where you're supposed to believe a la Raiders of the Lost Ark, and them opening the Ark and the spirits of the dead coming flying out. You're supposed to buy into that. And you kind of do in the Indiana Jones movies, but in this one, I just think it falls flat.
I agree. I mean, the directors of the films, I think, signify the success of the films, because we've got Robert Zemeckis, an early film for him, but he's already on fire. He's already, you can tell what his career is going to turn into on the basis of the stuff that he was doing in the mid-'80s. And then the sequels directed by Louis Teague, who's the director of Cujo, very much a sort of second stringer, second division director, and looks like it. This I'm sure was Hollywood's gift to him, a step up, a chance to see what he could do in the big leagues, and he blew it, frankly. Whereas Zemeckis just grabbed the opportunity and ran with it, and I think Romancing the Stone became sort of indicative of his career, whereas Lewis Teague was sort of out of his depth, I think.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, go on to do Navy SEALs. That's what you're known for.
Yeah, whereas Zemeckis goes on to all the great films that we know him for.
Obviously, Kathleen Turner has got a talent for comedy. She'd already done part of those first 3 movies that she did. She did Body Heat, which established her at the tippy top of the A-list headliners of Hollywood in 81. In 82, I think she did Man with Two Brains with Steve Martin, Carl Reiner film. And then she's Romancing the Stone. So she's obviously got that comedy leaning, and she does go back to that in that sort of like classic Hollywood way. She doesn't do many overt comedies that are not something else as well. She doesn't just do straight comedy. She does like a comedy crime film like Prizzi's Honor or Undercover Blues. I guess Undercover Blues is probably the closest she came to doing a straight comedy with these things. What stands out for you in a comedy career, obviously, other than the wonderful, wonderful collaboration with John Waters and Serial Mom?
Yeah, well, that's towards the end of the main body of her career, which, as you say, lasted about 15 years. Before that, I think, although she's not actually in the film as such, I think Who Framed Roger Rabbit is a film where she makes a huge impact, doing the voice of Jessica Rabbit, who I think became the sort of icon from that movie, more than the title star did, and more than Bob Hoskins did. When you mention that title, I think Kathleen's character, the animated look of the character for one thing, but also the voice performance, the vocal performance, are what people remember from that film. I think she rather stole that.
Yeah, I read an interview with her, and she said she just moved back to New York, and she was asked if people recognize her, and she says, people recognize when they hear my voice, they recognize me.
Yeah,
that's interesting. Obviously that's what most people know her for. That voice. And that playing a femme fatale is right up the street for that voice. I guess it's like Lauren Bacall.
Yeah. Well, there's a story that when she was introduced to Lauren Bacall sometime in the 80s, Kathleen went up to her and said, "Hi, I'm the young you," which I think when you watch a range of her films is not far off the mark. She does really come over as a sort of 80s and 90s equivalent of that 40s Bacall, very, very much so. And as we said, her films have often got this sort of retro feel to them, and often deal with sort of classic Hollywood themes, bringing them up into the 80s and 90s. But her performances do too. I think she fits in to those in a way that it's almost like there are roles that are earmarked for Kathleen Turner that you can't imagine any of her contemporaries being able to play. A one-off, and that may be the thing that ultimately sort of hampered her career and meant that there were because in turn I think there were probably roles that she wasn't suited for.
Yeah, she obviously had some health issues in the early 90s that really sort of like hampered continuing her career as she had been doing prior to that point. She was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis in the early 90s, and it really hampered her. It really changed how she looked in many ways. Cocktail.
And she was someone who I think the business saw as relying on looks, even though I don't think she would have seen it that way herself, and I don't think audiences would have seen it that way.
No, I think if anything, I think it's the other way around. I think some actors and from the 80s, you think, okay, they're there because they look like they look. Whereas Kathleen Turner, I don't think it was ever. Obviously, she's a very attractive woman, but it was. I don't think that was when you watch the movie after you finish watching the movie. That wasn't what you came away with.
No, and she doesn't rely on that either. Whereas, the industry maybe did and does and continues to with its performers, but she never did. She, I suppose, there's one line I can give there that sort of epitomises that, which is "Into the mud, scum queen" from Man with Two Brains. If she's prepared to do that, she's not someone who's relying on her looks, is she?
No, not at all. Literally, like the mousy, playing the mousy character in *Romancing the Stone*, because it's not the most flattering thing. You first see her, first time you see her on screen, her eyes are full of tears, snot rolling down her face, and tissues. Like, oh god, it's not the most flattering of looks. You get the grace with.
It's noticeable too across her films. We're sort of drifting away a bit from the comedies, so we'll come back to that in a minute. But just to mention, while we're on this sort of subject, it's noticeable, especially when she's doing sort of cop films or action films or the *Romancing the Stone* films, that she does seem to do quite a few of her own stunts as well. She's not afraid to get her hands dirty.
No, absolutely. I mean, looking at some of the roles that she played, like you said, I can't imagine other actresses of that time playing. For instance, I can't imagine Michelle Pfeiffer playing the character in *Romancing the Stone*.
No way.
Yeah, no, I can't imagine Meg Ryan playing Serial Mom.
Yeah. Both of those films need that sort of retro feel that we keep talking about. It needs someone who can play old-fashioned, and the Kathleen was just about the only person who could in her day. And I think that suited the comedy stuff that she did very well. It's a shame she didn't get to do more stuff like screwball comedies, because I suppose *War of the Roses* might be the nearest she comes to that. But have you got particular favourite comic roles that she played?
I guess Serial Mom is the one, but again, it's not really. It's not from the prime of her run. She was playing a very different type of character in Serial Mom. But I did like *Undercover Blues*, which was just a couple of years before, and it's kind of been forgotten. Herbert Ross movie, which Dennis Quaid, and they had a similar dynamic on screen. Her and Dennis Quaid to her and Michael Douglas, and there was something there between them two, which I thoroughly enjoyed.
Yeah, she's very good at sparking off with a male co-stars like that. I think with Nicholson in *Prizzi's Honor* as well. They make a great sort of a great team and really sort of spark off each other, and so they can be sort of antagonistic towards each other, or they can be sort of together as a couple. And I think that applies right the way through these partnerships on screen, which again is something that a classic Hollywood actress would have done 30 or 40 years earlier. But in terms of Serial Mom, she shows the ability to also lead a film solo, which she'd done already in a couple of other things, V.I. Warshawski, which we'll go on to talk about. *Undercover Blues*, and I must admit I've not seen that, so that's one for my list, I think.
Yeah, I mean it's not gonna rock your world in a way of like, oh my god, how have I not seen this film? But it's a really solid comedy, and it is of that type in the mid-90s where they seemingly introduced babies to every single film in the early 90s and mid-90s. It was like, oh, can we stick a baby in this? The audience loves babies, and they whack a baby into this. It's like two spies who've retired to raise their baby and get involved in a situation. It's like classic comedy routine sort of thing. But yeah, again, just she's great in it, and her and Dennis Quaid, another actor I quite like, who doesn't feel like he lived up to his potential that he had in his career, but they sparked really well in this movie. I thought.
Yeah, he's almost like the male Kathleen Turner in that sense.
Yeah, and also it's like it made me realise what V.I. Warshawski was missing, and it was missing an interesting male character, a supporting character. Because we in that movie we have a very dull male character sparking off Kathleen Turner in that. She's great in it, but it could have done with someone a bit more interesting in that movie.
Maybe, although I've got my own take on Warshawski, which doesn't necessarily need a competent male lead. So, but we'll talk about that when we get onto a sort of crime and cop stuff, I think. But let's talk about Serial Mom, eh?
Yeah, okay. Well, what's obviously you're a big John Waters fan, as am I.
Yeah.
This, I guess, was seen again. It's towards this. It's later on in his career.
Yes, it is.
Beyond the 70s extreme comedy.
The outrages, yeah. When he was doing more or less sort of punk cinema, before punk, he brought that into the mainstream. He's never ever lost the spirit of the filmmaker who made Pink Flamingos, just to say that Serial Mom has got all of the traditional John Waters elements in it. And it's the closest he ever came to actually making a proper horror film as well. It collides that into a story of Mom's apple pie. It's brilliantly done. I just think it works so well. And then it becomes a courtroom drama at the end, and crucially isn't a boring courtroom drama. The courtroom stuff is as wild and crazy as everything else. And Kathleen at the heart of it all is just brilliant. It's as you say, Adam, I think her looks were starting to change a bit then, whether through illness or age or whatever. And I think Kathleen Turner, we always knew right from Body Heat that she was someone who would be capable of taking on any role. As we've said, is someone who would do things on her own terms. And she was always going to turn into one of these actors who might just end up daring to work with John Waters or dipping a toe into that sort of counterculture world. And boy, does she go for it.
Well, she wasn't shy about working with people like that, when the opportunity arose. Obviously, working with Ken Russell in the early 80s as well, in a fairly, for the time, outrageous film.
Yeah. Crimes of Passion. Yeah.
Absolutely. Crimes of Passion and this goes to another point I was thinking about making, was like, if I was her agent in the 80s and the 90s, I don't think I would be telling her to take on the roles that she took in many ways, even though it was a great run of films. I think they would play it a bit different. I think working with Ken Russell on Crimes of Passion has got the opportunity to go wrong. Working with John Waters is she too young to be taking on mum roles? She starts taking on mum roles fairly early in the, she's like, it must be like 88, 87 when she's playing a mum character.
Yeah.
In The Accidental Tourist, I think that's maybe the first time she plays a mum, and she's like 5 or 6 years into her career here, on screen career anyway.
That's taking the parts that other actresses won't do, though, and which I think was her shtick all the way through her career was, if as you say, Meg Ryan or whoever it may be turns it down, I'll say yes, and I think that was her whole thing, and it's made her into a really interesting person to talk about. That's why we're talking about her today, and we're not talking about Melanie Griffith or someone.
Yeah.
I think she's so good in Serial Mom. She's obviously having a ball working with Waters, doing all of the murder stuff, doing all of the sort of innocent glances to camera and did I get away with that sort of thing, and then the courtroom stuff is magnificent as well. So I think she's having fun making that film, and I think she looked as though Kathleen always looked as though she was seeking out parts where she would have fun, where it would be a great job. It'd be something that would be interesting to make, rather than just taking any sort of standard female lead that came along. And all credit to her there. So, but yeah, she is good at comedy. She gets laughs in Serial Mom. She gets laughs in a lot of her other films at that sort of level. And again, it's another string to her bow. The fact that the actress from Body Heat can also do Serial Mom and can do War of the Roses and can voice Jessica Rabbit. There's incredible range there, more than just about anybody else around.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, she was saying, she was interviewed about the process of getting Serial Mom out there, and she said they played the film to the studios, and halfway through, one of the executives turned to her and asked her, "Is this a comedy?" And she went, "I knew then we were in trouble." It was just
yeah. But she always looked and sounded and came across as someone who knew what Hollywood was like inside out, and she managed to sort of step through that minefield for 20 years. And I think she can look back on her life and her career and say, look, I did what I wanted to. I made the films I wanted to. I never did anything that was dull or boring, And
Well, you say that. Now, you say that, but there is one movie that she singles out as the movie that she did for money.
Right.
And that's Switching Channels with Burt Reynolds. Now, she famously and equally Burt Reynolds was famous on interviews afterwards. They didn't get on at all in this movie, and she said she did it for the money, and she hates it because she did it for the money. But she was pregnant at the time.
Yeah,
figured I'm not going to work for a year, so let's just take the money and run.
Yeah,
and the actual quote she's come up with, I'm going to state it because it's great. It was supposed to be with Michael Caine, and he got stuck on Jaws 4. So the producer hired Burt Reynolds. And then the interview says, with devastating sarcasm, she draws, not exactly the same thing. So I think there was definite tension on that.
Yeah. Now, of course, we in the Walter Matthau podcast a short while ago, we mentioned Walter doing a remake of The Front Page with Billy Wilder, and here we've got another update of that same material. It was interesting to see. One great thing about Kathleen, as we say, is the chemistry that she has with her co-stars, be it the male lead or often even with supporting players. And I think it is fair to say that here that isn't present. The film does just sort of rather lie there.
Yeah, apparently Burt was quoted as saying, "I'm not taking second place to a woman" on that set, which I don't think set him up as being likable on set. With Kathleen.
No, and with the sort of person that Kathleen is, that ain't going to go down well, is it? So,
and arguably a bigger star than Burt Reynolds at that point in the 80s.
Definitely,
Burt wasn't exactly flying high at that point.
Not at all. But then again, neither was Michael Caine. So
no. Well, no. There you go. We just won the Oscar, though, hadn't he? So maybe he was aiming for an upturn at that point.
Yeah. Maybe. I mean, speaking of Oscars, Kathleen only got nominated for one, I think, which was for a film we've not mentioned yet.
No.
Peggy Sue Got Married, where she's working with Francis Ford Coppola and his nephew, Nicolas Cage. So
she's not fond of Nicolas Cage's performance in this movie.
No.
The nasally voice that he puts on for the role. Apparently, she went back to the director and went, "Is he really going to do it like that? Are you going to let him do it like that?"
Yeah. Now, I can see why Kathleen got her nomination for this movie rather than any other. There are 4 or 5 that I'd have probably nominated her for or given her an award for. But I think the business, the film industry, likes the fact in this film. Again, it's another retro thing. She's playing a character in 1960, and it's a sort of weird sort of time travel movie the year after Back to the Future, where she goes to a high school reunion and ends up back at high school, after an accident. The casting must have been very difficult for that film, to get actors who could play characters 25 years younger than they actually were, and it just about works. I think Cage and Kathleen just about get away with it. In terms of looks, I think they just about manage it, but I think in terms of performance, she nails it, and I think it was that dual role and the fact that she was playing a character 25 years younger in certain scenes that appealed when it came to looking at the best actress of 1986. I think it was that side of things that really appealed. And this whole nature of duality was a big thing in 80s cinema, because there was like the whole werewolf boom, for instance, and there were a few versions or even comedy versions of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. But then you'd got stuff like Barbra Streisand in Yentl. You'd got Julie Andrews in Victor Victoria, you'd got Dustin Hoffman in Tootsie, you'd got Steve Martin playing a half man, half woman in All of Me, you know, and then time travels back in fashion with Back to the Future. So, and I think Coppola's always had an interest in you know, weird shifting characters. He did it again years later in Youth Against Youth with Tim Roth. And I think Kathleen actually really understands this material and really grabs it. And I think it's quite a challenge for her as an actor. One little moment that I love in the film is it's just a very quick shot of her and 3 or 4 other girls. And I think it's the scene where they're watching Nicolas Cage and a very young Jim Carrey as part of a sort of doo-wop quartet who were sort of performing at the high school. And the girls are all sat on the bleachers watching them, and they're all sort of laughing and joking and having a great time. And it's almost as though Kathleen's character from 25 years later has accepted that she's now in 1960, and she's just sort of having fun. For the rest of the film, it's like, how do I get out of this? How do I get back to my own time? What's happening here? You know, and there's just these odd little moments where it's, hey, I'm a high school girl. And she's so great in those little scenes, those lovely little touches. I can understand why the Oscar committee liked her in that particular movie, because I think they do like it when actors, in their view, sort of push themselves. But I think Kathleen's been pushing herself throughout her whole career.
Is there any other movies you want to discuss, Daryl, from this period? Because I think we've covered most of them now.
I think
should we touch on V.R. Wachowski? Because
I think this is a major film in Kathleen's career, and it's not a film that's all that well known. Again, it's a solo turn, really. It's a solo female lead. And as you were saying, you know, that it hasn't got strong male characters other than Charles Durning, who comes in and plays the Charles Durning world-weary detective, you know, which he can do in his sleep. But it's Kathleen's movie. And as I was saying, I know you're a big fan of that sort of late 30s, early 40s period where there were these sort of series of B-movie programmers based around detectives. I suppose the famous ones are sort of Sherlock Holmes, The Thin Man, which is sort of the A-list version of that sort of thing, and Charlie Chan. But then I know you love things like Boston Blackie and Torchy Blane. And don't you think V.I. Wachowski plays very much like, so it's a very sort of insular, very self-contained little movie. And for me, it sort of plays a lot like an instalment of one of those series, like The Falcon or Torchy Blane or Mr. Moto or something. And it's really, again, got that sort of retro, early 40s feel to it, even though it's a contemporary set movie.
Yeah, no, it feels like it's a few years too late. And not just like from the 1940s, but even in the early 90s, those kind of movies weren't being made for the big screen. They were episodes of Columbo. They were, Murder, She Wrote. They were those kind of things. And even now, when they tried to bring Jack Reacher to the big screen, that kind of audiences don't really want to see that kind of thing on the big screen anymore.
Yeah, Wachowski's even got that sort of cable TV type look to it, hasn't it? Yeah, something you'd switch on late night after getting back from a night out, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, absolutely. I do like it. I like the movie a lot. I think it's a nice contained movie, and it's got a nice few twists, and the storyline's good. And she owns the movie. It's definitely her movie, and she's again playing the role that other actresses of that time probably wouldn't have done. She's being the PI, she's being the private eye, so she's running down leads, she's getting beaten up by mob bosses
and taking it and dishes it out as well. She's almost playing it like a male character at times, but
she's playing it like Marlowe or someone like that, someone from like a film noir where they wake up the next morning and their teeth are in a bowl and they've got a black eye, and it's that kind of thing. And she's playing
without the sense that this is a male character that's been rewritten for a woman, because I think it's based on a series of novels. I think
it's based on a series of novels by Sarah Paretsky, which I think she had a few issues with this film initially. And I can see why. There's still some of that hangover of the 80s and 90s sexist, misogynistic writing in there, woven into the script by some of the incidental characters commenting on her.
I think they get away with that in this though, because she gives as good as she gets, and because she fights back. I think it's absolutely valid there, where it isn't in Jewel of the Nile. The film would be weaker without that, I think, because it gives that sense of conflict, and it gives that sense that she's not only sort of fighting crime, but she's fighting society as well. She's fighting to have the right to be a private investigator, and there's so much pressure against that. And everyone she confronts tells her basically, you shouldn't be doing this. And in a very Kathleen Turner style, I think she must have identified with the Wachowski character quite a bit, because it's very like Kathleen Turner. She's saying, no, I'm going to do things on my terms. I think the film's great. It's the best Chicago movie since The Blues Brothers.
It feels rooted in that town.
Yeah, and what about that speedboat chase? Puppet on a chain, Amsterdam, James Bond, step aside. Here's Kathleen Turner at the wheel of a speedboat.
I wish it was better directed.
Yeah, there is that. But I'd give that a bit of leeway and say, because it's got that cable TV late night sort of look to it, flat direction almost sort of works in its favour for me. I love this film so much, and I do give it a little bit of due here and there. I can sort of explain away its flaws as being part of its makeup.
Yeah, possibly. I think maybe not. I do like the film. I like the film a lot, but there's a few things in where you just think, why have they done that? Why? They have the scene at the start. Apparently in the book, she knows the main character who gets killed. Right? It's a friend of a friend sort of character, And in this one, they have it as a one-night stand that she picks up.
Yeah.
And it just feels really forced that it's a one-night stand that she picks up, and then that same night, they decide not to have a one-night stand, and they'll meet again later. That same night, he rocks up on a doorstep with the kid, and it just feels really forced.
I know what you mean. I like the whole pickup bit in the bar, because again, that shows that she's a powerful woman, that she's making her own decisions. She's not going to just sit there and wait for guys to sort of come up and buy her a drink, sort of thing. But yeah, then the introduction of the kid and the departure of the male character, it's plot really, But as I say, rooting this in the world of your Boston Blackies and your Falcons and your Torchy Blaines and those sort of 1940s detective, series of films, it's got all the same flaws that they had. And so for me, it works in that retro sense. I'm thinking, oh yeah, I don't quite buy that, but then I wouldn't have bought it in a Charlie Chan film either, and because I wouldn't have bought it in a Charlie Chan film, I quite like that I'm not buying it here. It's that sort of connection for me. There's some great lines in the film. I love the whole shtick, and presumably this comes out of the books, where people keep asking her, what does the V stand for? Or why are you called V.I. Wachowski? And she's always got a snappy reply to that, or a quick rejoinder to it. There are great lines as well. I assume these may be taken from the novels, where in reference to a name, she says, well, you can't be patronised so easily by men if they don't know your first name, Or there's a brilliant line which is worthy of a T-shirt or bumper sticker, I think, where she says, never underestimate a man's ability to underestimate a woman. And that's that character summed up, I think, in one line of dialogue.
Sadly, it wasn't a hit, and we never got more V.I. Wachowski novels, because it feels like it was setting her up for a little franchise.
It does. It's very much like part one of a series, isn't it? And I really wish there'd been more, because I think Kathleen would have liked to do this. I think she likes this character, and I think she'd love to have done more of those.
Well, she did 2 BBC audio adaptations of 2 other books in the V.I. Wachowski, where she narrated / played the character again on audio. So
So there's a couple more hours of Kathleen Turner's golden voice, then, folks.
Yeah, they did another 2 after that, with one with Sharon Gless of
Cagney and
Lacey fame. Yeah, so not quite the same, but there you go. So yeah, that pretty much covers the main bulk of her Hollywood movie star career. After that, she started transitioning into mum roles in kids' films and supporting roles in films like Moonlight and Valentino and things like that. So still profile, but then she moved into the stage after that and has been doing stellar work on the stage for the last 20 years or so.
Yeah. Now, as film fans, we're sort of lamenting the fact that she had sort of less than 15 years at the top. But then you put that in perspective and say that's more than most female stars.
Yeah.
The range that she played within these sort of limitations, within these little batches of, as you've said, comedy, crime, and adventure movies. She was the queen of those for 15 years.
Yeah, and you compare that to her contemporaries at the time. You know, your Meg Ryans, your Michelle Pfeiffers, people like that, Melanie Griffith. They only had about 15 years as well, maybe 20 tops. You know, some of them.
And I bet they all look at Kathleen Turner's career and go, boy, I wish I'd had the balls to do that.
Yeah, there is definitely that. So a great career, and hopefully we'll start seeing her crop up again in some. She just the odd bit here and there. She was in the Michael Douglas TV series that is on Netflix, the Kamelsky Method. She cropped up in that a couple of episodes of that recently. So she's still knocking about, and she's doing a one-woman show at the moment on stage. So hopefully that'll make it over to England. Apparently it's controversial. She doesn't hold back.
Again, that's Kathleen Turner.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, when we love her for it. Okay, great. Well, we'll be back in another couple of weeks with another excellent topic. Thanks, Daryl.
Thanks, Adam. Been a pleasure.
Thanks again to the BFI and Quad for helping support these podcasts. And we will see you again in a couple of weeks. Take care.